You know how it is. A relationship ends and you're kind of left wondering, okay, what just happened there? It happens to everyone, I think.
It really does. It's pretty universal.
Well, in this deep dive, we're going to try and get past just guessing. We're looking at, well, the reasons relationships often hit the rocks, drawing on actual psychological research.
Yeah, insights from the experts.
Think of it as like a shortcut to understanding some of those dynamics that researchers have actually pinpointed.
Exactly.
Okay.
We want to give you, the listener, a bit of a framework, maybe some of those aha moments that help things click, whether it's thinking about your own life or, relationships you've seen.
And it's important, right? This isn't about pointing fingers.
No, definitely not. It's not about blame at all. It's more about understanding the different factors, the things that kind of push a relationship one way or another. We've looked at a whole load of psychological stuff, communication, trust, expectations.
Okay, great. Let's get into it then. One of the first things that kind of jumped out at me was this whole idea of failure. Should we even call it that when a relationship ends? It feels so negative.
It does, doesn't it? And, well, the research often suggests looking at it differently. Even relationships that don't, last forever can be incredibly valuable for you.
How so?
Well, they often teach you really important lessons about yourself, about what you actually need from a partner. And those insights, they help you grow, right? They can really shape your future connections in a positive way.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah, the ending isn't automatically a failure. It could be a chance to learn something important.
That's a much better way to frame it, I think. Take some of the pressure off, maybe. Focuses on growth. Okay, so talking about experts, one name kept coming up again and again. John Gottman.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Gottman,
Mhm.
his work is like foundational.
Yeah.
Decades of research really mapping out relationship dynamics. He's famous for identifying what he calls the four horsemen of the apocalypse for relationships.
The Four Horsemen. Wow, sounds pretty dramatic.
It does sound serious, yeah. Basically, there are these really negative communication patterns that he found are strongly linked to relationships ending, like divorce.
Okay, so what are they? These horsemen.
Right, so they are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, got it.
But here's the really crucial thing for you to know. All couples do these things sometimes. Every single one. It's not about never doing them.
Okay, so it's not like if you criticize once, it's doomed.
Exactly. What Gottman found matters is the frequency. How often do these pop up? And crucially, is there a balance? Are there enough positive interactions to outweigh the negative ones? He talks about this 5-to-1 ratio during conflict.
5 positive for every 1 negative. Okay, that makes sense. So let's break them down. First up, criticism. What does that look like in, real life? How does it show up for you?
So criticism isn't just like complaining about something specific. Hey, you forgot to take the trash out. That's a complaint. Criticism goes deeper. It's an attack on your partner's character.
Right.
It often involves blaming, making accusations, using those big general statements like you always or you never.
A global statement.
Yeah, like, you never consider my feelings, you're just so selfish, or you never do anything around the house, you're so lazy. See the difference? It's attacking them, not just the behavior. That's the key insight. It's incredibly damaging.
Oof. Yeah, I can feel how those would land, much harsher than just pointing out a specific thing. So what happens to you, to the relationship, if criticism becomes a regular thing?
Well, the fallout is pretty significant for you. First off, it really chips away at your self-esteem. Constant attacks make you feel, well, inadequate, maybe unloved.
Makes sense.
Then it obviously messes up communication.
Yeah.
You might pull back, get defensive yourself, just stop wanting to talk. Resentment starts building up because you feel constantly judged and unappreciated.
Huh.
And naturally, trust erodes. It's hard to feel emotionally safe with someone who's always attacking your character, right?
Yeah.
So intimacy suffers. That feeling of closeness weakens, and ultimately your overall satisfaction with the relationship just plummets.
That paints a really clear and pretty bleak picture of how one negative pattern can spiral. Okay, so horseman number 2. What's next in this ominous lineup for us?
Next up is contempt. And honestly, our sources consistently point to this one as the most toxic, most dangerous for your relationship.
Worse than criticism. Wow. Okay, what is contempt then?
Contempt is basically treating your partner with disrespect. It carries this undercurrent of disgust, maybe condescension, ridicule. It sends the message that you feel superior to them.
Okay, so how might that actually look? Like in everyday arguments or conversations you might have?
It can manifest in lots of ways. Think insults, name-calling, using humor that's hostile or mocking towards your partner. Sarcasm that's really meant to wound, even non-verbally, like eye-rolling, sneering.
Oh, the eye roll.
Yeah, exactly. The core message you're sending, consciously or not, is that your partner is somehow worthless or beneath you.
Wow, that sounds incredibly damaging. What's the impact on you and the relationship when contempt is present?
It's just devastating for you, really.
Yeah.
At its heart, it signals a complete lack of respect. And without respect, it's almost impossible for a relationship to thrive.
Yeah, respect feels fundamental.
Totally. It causes deep emotional harm, feelings of shame, distress, worthlessness. It obviously crushes your self-esteem. And it's a massive communication blocker for you. You can't resolve anything constructively when you're slinging insults.
Right.
This destruction of trust, plus the sheer stress it creates for you. It can even impact your physical and mental health.
Mm.
We're talking links to anxiety, depression, and no surprise, it tanks your satisfaction with the relationship.
Okay, that's a heavy one. Moving on then, the third horseman is defensiveness. I feel like this is one many of us can probably recognize in ourselves sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. It's a super common reaction for you when you feel like you're being accused or attacked.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? You want to defend yourself.
Yeah.
So it looks like making excuses, denying you had any part in the problem, maybe even hitting back with a counterattack. Well, you did this, that kind of thing.
Right.
And while that initial urge to protect yourself is understandable for you, the problem is it almost always just escalates the conflict. It makes things worse, not better.
Can you give us an example, like a simple one of how defensiveness might pop up for you?
Sure. Okay. Imagine your partner asks,
Yeah.
pretty neutrally, "Hey, did you remember to grab tomatoes when you were at the store?"
Okay.
A defensive response from you might sound like, "Well, you didn't put it on the list I asked you to make, so obviously I didn't get it. Why don't you just go get it yourself next time if it's that important?"
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, I hear it. It totally deflects and adds that aggressive edge.
Exactly. You might feel unfairly questioned, but that response doesn't address the tomato situation, and it definitely doesn't help either of you feel closer.
Right, it just throws up a wall, and instead of dealing with the actual question about tomatoes, what are the longer term effects if this becomes a pattern in your relationship?
Well, for you, defensiveness basically blocks open, honest communication. It makes it really hard to actually solve problems together. By constantly making excuses or shifting blame, you avoid taking any accountability, which can be super frustrating for your partner.
I can imagine.
This creates emotional distance. You lose that feeling of connection. And
Hmm.
over time, this pattern just breeds resentment and hostility. And like the others, it really lowers how happy you both feel in the relationship.
Okay. And that brings us to the last one, the fourth horseman. Stonewalling. The name kind of suggests just building a wall, shutting down on you.
That's exactly it. That's precisely what stonewalling is for you. It's when one partner just completely withdraws from the conversation or the conflict, shuts down emotionally, sometimes even physically turns away, refuses to engage.
So they just stop talking or
Right.
walk away.
Yeah, or they might, suddenly get really busy with their phone or start tidying up or just stare blankly, tuning out, acting busy, basically anything to avoid the interaction, especially during a conflict.
Why does someone do that? Why stonewall in a relationship with you?
Often it's actually a self-preservation thing. Is a way someone might cope when they feel completely flooded or overwhelmed by the conflict, like their system just shuts down.
Okay, so it's not always malicious.
Not always consciously malicious, no. But here's the thing, our source is really stress. To the other person, to you, it feels like rejection, like being completely ignored and dismissed by the person you care about most. Our brains are apparently wired to see that kind of social exclusion as a major threat.
Ah, that evolutionary thing. Feeling ostracized.
Kind of, yeah. The core feeling for you is just being emotionally abandoned in that moment. It's deeply hurtful and incredibly frustrating.
So, beyond just being annoying or frustrating for you right then, what's the lasting damage stonewalling can do?
Oh, it does significant emotional damage for you. It makes you feel unimportant, like your feelings just don't matter to your partner at all. And it completely halts communication, obviously. You can't resolve anything if one person refuses to engage.
Impossible.
Right. And instead of calming things down, it often just makes the conflict worse because the other person might get angrier or more desperate trying to get a response. It seriously damages that emotional connection, making it harder for you to trust and feel close. And like the others, it's a major contributor to feeling unsatisfied in the relationship.
Wow. It's pretty sobering, isn't it, hearing how these specific ways of communicating or not communicating can be so destructive for you.
Yeah.
Now, our sources also talked a lot about unresolved conflict. It feels like these things, the horsemen and unresolved conflict, must be like really closely linked.
Oh, they're totally intertwined for you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you consistently avoid dealing with issues, when problems don't get worked through constructively, they don't just magically disappear.
Right, they hang around.
Exactly. Instead, they create distance between you and your partner. Resentment builds up. There's this constant underlying tension. You start to feel kind of disengaged. Think of it like your needs aren't being met, and those negative feelings just pile up over time.
And little things become big things.
Yeah, precisely. What starts as maybe a small, seemingly insignificant issue can totally snowball into something much bigger and way more damaging for your relationship down the road.
And this feeds right back into those four horsemen we were just discussing, yeah.
Perfectly put. For you, when conflicts just sit there unresolved, festering,
Mm-hmm.
the chances of criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling showing up in your interactions, they go way up.
So it's a
It's
cycle?
a classic negative feedback loop,
Mm.
a really vicious cycle where these bad communication habits get more and more ingrained because the root problems are never actually tackled. And what's more, this constant state of unresolved conflict often signals and then reinforces deeper trust issues for you. Well, if you consistently can't work through problems together, you and your partner might start to doubt each other's commitment.
Uh,
Question whether the other person is really willing to put in the effort to navigate difficulties.
That makes total sense. If you can't handle the small stuff together, how can you trust you'll handle the big stuff?
Hmm.
Which I guess leads us right into the erosion of trust itself. That feels like another absolute bedrock for everyone.
Exactly. Trust is fundamental, and it starts to diminish for you when you don't feel safe being vulnerable, being open with your partner. And like we just said, a pattern of unresolved conflict really undermines that feeling of safety.
Yeah.
Resentment builds those emotional walls between you. It chips away at that goodwill, that benefit of the doubt that's just so essential for trust in any relationship.
So how might this lack of trust actually, show up? What are the signs or behaviors that cause even more damage for you?
Well, when trust is weak for you, it's obviously hard to connect deeply, emotionally. This can breed feelings like jealousy, suspicion. You might feel insecure about what your partner's doing or thinking.
Like wanting to check their phone.
Exactly. Maybe constantly questioning their loyalty or, yeah, feeling that urge to snoop through their phone or social media. You or your partner might also start withholding information, maybe avoiding certain topics to sidestep potential conflict. You become more defensive.
Feeding that cycle again.
Totally. It just fuels itself. The lack of trust leads to behaviors that erode trust even further. And ultimately, without that solid foundation of trust, it's incredibly difficult for you to have a relationship that feels healthy and genuinely fulfilling. It's all connected back to those unresolved issues and those destructive communication patterns.
It really is all interconnected when you break it down like this, isn't it?
Okay.
Shifting gears slightly, our sources also pointed to mismatched expectations as a really major factor for people.
Yes, definitely. This is a huge one for you to consider. Think about it. Your ideas about what a relationship should be like, they come from everywhere.
Like where?
Well, the culture you grew up in, societal pressures, things you see in the media, and then, of course, just your own personal values and what you want out of life, your goals.
Right.
And when you and your partner are just not on the same page about some of those fundamental things, it can lead to huge conflicts and a lot of unhappiness for both of you.
Can you give us some concrete examples, things you might observe?
Sure. Okay. So maybe one partner, let's call him Frank, really wants to get married and have kids soon. But his partner, Laura, she's not sure she ever wants kids. That's a big mismatch, right?
Huge.
Or maybe Steve believes in strict monogamy, but Jane feels open relationships are okay. That's a fundamental difference in expectations about the relationship structure itself. It could even be about time together. Calvin might expect to spend almost all his free time with Chloe, while Chloe really values her independence and time with her own friends. That difference in expectation about togetherness can cause real friction for them,
Yeah, I can see that.
or even life priorities. Brianna dreams of backpacking around the world for a year, while Jada is focused on buying a house and settling down. Those are just fundamentally different paths.
Yeah.
And sometimes those differences feel irreconcilable for you.
It really highlights how important it is to actually talk about this stuff, maybe early on, even if it's awkward for you and your partner. Those core values, life goals.
Absolutely crucial. And, something else our sources touched on briefly was social media's role in this.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, you know how social media often shows these, like, perfect, super idealized versions of
Not
relationship.
highlight reel, yeah.
Exactly. And constantly seeing those curated, often unrealistic images can kind of subtly warp your own expectations. It can set you up for disappointment when your actual real-life relationship, with all its normal ups and downs, doesn't look like those perfect online snapshots.
That's a really good point for you to think about. Okay, another key thing that came up was a lack of intimacy. Now, people often jump straight to sex, but it seems like it's broader than that, right?
Oh, much broader for you.
Yeah.
Yes, sexual intimacy is definitely part of it for many couples and an important one. But intimacy in this wider sense, it's more like the emotional glue of the relationship.
Emotional glue. I like that.
Yeah, it's about feeling deeply connected, feeling understood, knowing you've got each other's backs, that sense of being a team,
Hmm.
sharing your life, not just your space.
Okay. So what happens to you when that glue starts to weaken, when intimacy fades?
Well, without that vital connection, whether it's the emotional closeness, physical affection, sexual intimacy, or all of the above, you and your partner might start to feel like you're just roommates. Yeah, like you're coexisting rather than truly connecting. You might stop making quality time a priority, maybe that initial spark fades, and you just gradually drift apart. You lose that shared purpose, that deep emotional bond.
And the consequences of that drifting.
It leads to significant emotional distance, maybe feeling lonely even when you're together. It can also erode trust and make communication feel strained. And yes, in some situations, it can increase the chances of infidelity. Someone might look elsewhere for that missing intimacy.
Right.
Plus, think about it, that strong sense of intimacy. It creates a safe space for you to be vulnerable, to tackle conflicts constructively. When that intimacy is weak, dealing with challenges becomes much, much harder.
It sounds like intimacy is absolutely essential for you and your partner to kind of navigate the tough times that inevitably come up. Okay, let's tackle incompatibility. This word gets thrown around a lot as a reason things end. But like, how incompatible is too incompatible? Is perfect compatibility even a thing?
Yeah, that's the tricky part for you. And no, perfect. 100% compatibility. Probably not realistic. And actually, some differences can be good. They can be complementary, make things more interesting.
Right.
But when you have really significant areas of incompatibility, and crucially, they're not being talked about or addressed, that's when they cause ongoing conflict, just a whole lot of frustration for both of you. Our sources kind of broke this down into a few key areas where this often shows up.
Like what are some specific areas where incompatibility might really cause problems for you?
Well, we touched on some already, those fundamental differences in core values and life goals,
Mm.
like the kids thing or career versus family focus.
Right.
Then there are communication styles. Maybe one of you is super direct, says exactly what's on your mind, while the other is much more indirect, avoids confrontation. Or how you handle conflict emotionally. One person gets very expressive, the other becomes very logical and detached. Those can clash badly for you. Personality differences too. Like a major extrovert paired with a major introvert navigating social life can become a constant battle.
Mm.
Or even daily habits, super organized versus very spontaneous. If those differences are extreme, they can create real friction in your shared life.
Yeah, the little things can add up.
Totally. And finally, intimacy and affection levels. Big differences in sex drive, or how much physical touch and verbal affection you each need and express. If one person feels constantly deprived or overwhelmed in that area, it leads to chronic dissatisfaction for you.
But you said earlier that some differences are okay. So what makes the difference between like a manageable incompatibility and a deal breaker for you?
I think the absolute key factor for you is willingness. Are both you and your partner open to understanding where the other person is coming from? Are you both genuinely willing to try and find compromises that respect both your needs?
So communication again.
Communication and compromise, yeah. Absolutely essential for navigating these differences.
Yeah.
But if these incompatibilities just lead to constant fighting, if one or both of you consistently feels misunderstood, unfulfilled, or just plain resentful, well, that's when it can definitely lead you to question if the relationship is fundamentally right for you in the long run.
Okay, that makes sense. Finally, the sources got into some really heavy territory, unhealthy relationship dynamics, specifically talking about toxic and abusive situations, and also codependency.
Yeah, these are really serious patterns.
Yeah.
They fundamentally break down those essential elements of trust and safety that a relationship needs to survive, let alone thrive for you.
Let's start with toxic and abusive dynamics.
Okay. These situations inflict really deep emotional wounds. We're talking feelings of shame, constant fear, worthlessness, really low self-esteem. When there's control and manipulation involved, it creates these awful power imbalances and breeds so much resentment.
It sounds exhausting.
It is emotionally exhausting for you. The constant arguments, the unpredictable behavior, people often just emotionally disengage as a survival mechanism. And in clearly abusive relationships, you often see that horrible cycle. The abuse happens, then come the apologies, the promises, it won't happen again,
Yeah.
which makes it incredibly confusing and difficult for victims to leave.
Yeah.
Ultimately, these kinds of relationships are just fundamentally unsatisfying and damaging for you, but escaping them can be incredibly hard due to the control, the manipulation, the fear.
And what about codependency? We hear that term a lot too when talking about relationship struggles. What does that actually look like for you?
Codependency for you is often marked by really blurry or non-existent personal boundaries. One partner becomes way too focused on the other partner's needs, often sacrificing their own well-being in the process. This usually leads to resentment down the line because it's so unbalanced.
So it's like one person is doing all the giving.
Often, yeah. And sometimes the codependent partner might actually enable the other's destructive behaviors like addiction, maybe irresponsibility, because they feel like it's their job to help or fix them.
Ah, okay.
This creates this unhealthy dynamic of dependency and control. The less functional partner relies on the codependent one for validation, maybe even basic functioning, while the codependent partner gets their sense of self-worth from feeling needed, feeling like they're essential even if the situation is harmful.
So it's kind of like an addiction itself.
In a way, yeah. It's often described as an addictive dynamic. These relationships are usually very one-sided. They don't meet both people's needs healthily. And even though they're destructive, that deep sense of dependence makes them really hard for you to break free from.
Wow. Okay. That's
Oh.
that's a lot to take in. But it really does provide such a helpful way for you to start thinking about the sheer complexity of why relationships sometimes end. So just to kind of recap the main themes we hit. We talked about those negative communication patterns, right? Gottman's four horsemen, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling as major warning signs for you.
Yep, absolutely.
We looked at how unresolved conflict and that slow erosion of trust create these really damaging cycles in your relationships.
Hmm.
We talked about the impact of mismatched expectations, what you think a relationship should be, and also what happens when intimacy, that emotional glue, disappears.
Right. And then the issues around significant incompatibility when differences aren't addressed. And finally, those really harmful, unhealthy dynamics like abuse and codependency.
Exactly.
And the hope really is that for you listening, this deep dive hasn't just felt like a list of problems, but maybe offered some useful insights, those aha moments we talked about.
Yeah.
A clearer lens, perhaps, for understanding the intricate factors at play in our closest connections.
Yeah.
Because recognizing these patterns, whether you're reflecting on your own past or maybe seeing things in relationships around you, and that knowledge can be really empowering,
Mhm.
as you navigate your own connections.
Absolutely. So, thinking about everything we've unpacked today, maybe a final thought for you, the listener. Considering all these different facets, is there one particular area within relationships that you feel most curious about exploring more in your own life right now? Or perhaps maybe the real failure isn't always the ending itself, but maybe it's the lack of understanding that happened along the way. What new understanding might you take away from this deep dive into the sources today?